Welcome to Concrete Block, the podcast where we dive into the latest news and current events from around the world. I'm your host, Walter, and we're glad you're joining us today. As we start this episode, we're taking a closer look at a story that's been unfolding in Bosnia and Herzegovina. The country's constitution, authored by the United States, has been in place for over 2 decades, but it's been widely criticized for its flaws. According to experts, the document violates basic human rights and has led to a deeply dysfunctional political system. Jasmin Mujanovic, a political scientist specializing in Southeastern European politics, has written extensively on this topic. In a recent article, he argues that the constitution has been a disaster for Bosnia and Herzegovina, perpetuating nationalism and undermining the country's chances of joining the European Union and NATO. Mujanovic suggests that the key to resolving this issue lies in achieving comprehensive constitutional reform, which would require a commitment from pro-EU and pro-NATO elements in Sarajevo. He proposes a coalition between multi-ethnic and ethnic Bosniak parties, which could then approach the US and EU for support. However, this is a complex and challenging process, with many stakeholders involved. Serbia and Croatia, in particular, have significant influence in the region and would need to be persuaded to acquiesce to any changes. As we explore this story further, it's essential to consider multiple perspectives and avoid taking sides. The situation in Bosnia and Herzegovina is nuanced, and there are no easy solutions. But one thing is clear. The current system is not working, and something needs to change. We'll be examining this issue in more depth, looking at the potential consequences of constitutional reform and the role that international organizations can play in supporting this process. We'll also be discussing other top news stories from around the world, so stay tuned. We'll be right back with more of today's top news on Concrete Block. Welcome back to Concrete Block. We're glad you're still with us as we dive into the latest news from around the world. In our middle segment today, we're taking a closer look at US President Donald Trump's recent visit to Saudi Arabia, where he touted a $142 billion arms deal and lifted sanctions on Syria. Now, let's break down what this means for both countries and the wider region. The arms deal is a significant development, with Saudi Arabia committing to purchase a range of military equipment from the United States. This move is expected to boost the U.S. economy and create jobs, but it also raises questions about the potential consequences of such a large arms sale. On the other hand, the lifting of sanctions on Syria is a surprising move, given the country's complex and often contentious history with the U.S. Trump has stated that his goal is to give Syria a chance at greatness, but critics argue that this decision may embolden the Syrian government and potentially destabilize the region further. It's also worth noting that Trump's visit to Saudi Arabia was marked by a lavish lunch with billionaire ally Elon Musk and other business leaders. This has sparked concerns about the potential for conflicts of interest and the influence of corporate interests on U.S. foreign policy. As we consider these developments, it's essential to approach the topic with nuance and balance. While some may view Trump's actions as a positive step towards strengthening US-Saudi relations and promoting economic growth, others may see them as reckless or misguided. To gain a deeper understanding of this complex issue, let's take a look at some of the key players involved. Saudi Arabia's Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman has been a driving force behind the country's efforts to modernize and diversify its economy. However, his human rights record and role in the killing of journalist Jamal Khashoggi have raised significant concerns. Meanwhile, Trump's decision to lift sanctions on Syria has been met with skepticism by some experts, who argue that it may undermine efforts to hold the Syrian government accountable for its actions. As we continue to monitor this situation, it's crucial to consider multiple perspectives and evaluate the potential consequences of these developments. We'll be keeping a close eye on how this story unfolds and providing updates as more information becomes available. That's all for now. Stay tuned for our final story of the day, right here on Concrete Block. Welcome back to Concrete Block. We're coming down to the final stretch of today's show, and we've got a significant story to wrap up with. As you may have been following, President Donald Trump's Liberation Day tariffs have been making headlines lately, and today was a pivotal day in the ongoing legal battle surrounding these levies. A key hearing took place at the U.S. Court of International Trade, where arguments were presented on whether to block the implementation of these tariffs. The tariffs, which were announced back in April, have been met with opposition from various groups, including small businesses, Democratic-led states, and even a Native American tribe. The central argument against the tariffs is that they abuse the emergency law, which the Trump administration claims justifies their imposition due to threats to the U.S. economy and supply chain stemming from trade deficits. However, opponents argue that this interpretation stretches the law too far, potentially setting a dangerous precedent for unchecked executive power in trade policy. During today's hearing, judges heard arguments from both sides but gave little indication of how they might rule on the matter. The Trump administration maintains that the tariffs are necessary to protect American interests and that the courts do not have the authority to review the president's decision on this issue. On the other hand, those challenging the tariffs argue that they amount to a massive tax on American consumers, infringe upon congressional authority, and fail to specifically target goods or services connected to the alleged emergencies cited by the administration, such as drug trafficking. This legal battle has significant implications for U.S. trade policy, the balance of power between the executive and legislative branches, and the global economy. As we wait for the court's decision, it's essential to continue monitoring developments and considering the multifaceted impacts of these tariffs on various stakeholders. That's all for today's Concrete Block. Remember to like, share, and subscribe. And until next time, stay informed,